members of council, members of the executive management, members of Senate, our inaugurant this afternoon, Professor Nyna Amin, family and friends of Professor Amin, academics and professional staff, students, alumni, our distinguished guests from universities and organizations within South Africa, the African continent, and across the globe. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Nyna, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural lecture of Professor Nyna Amin. The Vice Chancellor conveys his congratulations and the best wishes to Professor Nyna Amin. Inaugural lectures form part of the university's public lecture series and may only be presented by newly appointed full professors who have been appointed in academic schools and centers. Inaugural lectures present an opportunity for showcasing the exciting and groundbreaking research and teaching being carried out by our professors in our university. Each lecture represents a significant milestone in an academic's career, providing official recognition of their promotion or appointment to full professorship. These lectures are furthermore an ideal opportunity for new professors to introduce themselves and to present an overview of their own contribution to their field, to academic peers, students, and research collaborators. Inaugural lectures are also a platform for celebrating a professor's academic achievements with his or her family, friends, mentors, and colleagues. Distinguished guests, it is my pleasure to now introduce the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Teaching and Learning, Professor Thabo Msibi, who will now introduce the inaugurant, Professor Nyna Amin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mkhize. A very good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm very delighted this afternoon to be introducing one of our most distinguished scholars in the School of Education, who has played a profound role in the development of so many of us attending this afternoon's inaugural lecture. Sitting in the room today where I am located are a number of academics from the School of Education who would have very much loved to have been part of the room there in the Senate room celebrating Professor Amin's fantastic achievement. It is a pleasure at the stage for me to introduce Professor Amin, who is a full professor in the discipline of curriculum studies within the College of Humanities at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She obtained her senior primary diploma from the Transvaal College of Education from the University of South Africa, and her M.Ed from Durban Westville, and the D.Ed from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Professor Amin joined the School of Education at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2006 as a lecturer in the Leadership Equity Advancement Program, which is known as the LEAP program. In 2009, she was credentialed and appointed as a lecturer in a permanent capacity. She was promoted to senior lecturer in 2012, associate professor in 2016, and rose to full professor in 2021. Professor Amin has held the position of cluster leader in 2016, academic leader of research in 2012, and again in 2020 to 2023. She was appointed by the University of Zimbabwe as a chief examiner for all qualifications of the 15 affiliated colleges of education for the period of 2016 to 2019. Sciences, was appointed as a critical reader for a PhD student at the Michigan State University and has mentored Fulbright students. Professor Amin is co-founder and editor of the journal African Perspectives of Research in Teaching and Learning at the University of Limpopo, an editor for Alternation, which is a journal located here at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and a member of the editorial boards of the Africa University Review and the Journal of Health Research and Society. Prof. Amin's awards include Fulbright Scholarship at Michigan State University, the Tripartite Alliance Scholarships at the University of Liege in Belgium in 2009 to 2010, and she won the Best Research Engagement category at the University of Pretoria. In 2011, she was awarded the university's Distinguished Teachers Award here at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and received National Commendation for Teaching Excellence from HELTASA. She became a National Research Foundation rated scientist in 2019. Prof. Amin has served as a reviewer for the NRF and for 6 international and 18 national journals. She has successfully supervised 16 doctoral students, postdocs. She has published 2 co-edited books and 15 book chapters, as well as editorials. She is currently supervising 8 PhDs and 8 MA students, whilst 2 PhD programs are still under review, or students are still undergoing examination. She has examined a number of master's and PhD theses from UNISA, from the University of Pretoria, from DUT, from Northwest, and a number of other South African universities. Prof. Amin has given keynote lectures in Belgium, United Kingdom, India, United States, and in South Africa. She has participated as a discussant on various research panels, delivered public lectures, and organized colloquia and conferences. She has chaired the Education Association of South Africa, which is known as the IASA, and is a member of SAERA, as well as the Oxford Symposium on School and Family-Based Counseling, as well as the International Sociological Association and the Disaster Coping Research Team, and finally, the BRICS Sociology Team. Prof. Amin's work represents an interdisciplinary yet coherent and intellectual work on higher education and curriculum, using discourse analysis, narrative inquiry, or a combination of these methods. In particular, the analyses are framed by political theory to make visible the aporious ironies, contradictions, and uncertainties in higher education. The relevance and significance of the academic work lies in deconstructing the curriculum in relation to the multi-layered contextual realities of education in South Africa. South Africa's history, geography, psychology, and philosophy, she argues, requires new approaches, new conversations, and a shift away from dominant and pathological discourses. Her work shatters myths, encourages new conversations, and suggests radical approaches and developing new ways of thinking about curriculum in the best interests of student achievement, learning experience, and future aspirations. As you can tell from this lengthy introduction, this is a highly distinguished scholar, and we're looking forward to hearing her inaugural lecture this afternoon. I invite Professor Amin now to address us.
Warm greetings to Professor Shlanshla Mkhize, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the College of Humanities, Professor Thabo Masibi, Deputy Vice Chancellor of Teaching and Learning, the Registrar, Council, members of Council and Senate, colleagues, family, and friends from near and far. I am overwhelmed by the number who have registered and are present for today's lecture. Thank you for your time and interest in my scholarship. I am delighted to share my journey to professorship with you. Before I begin, I'd like to make a dedication. So, Mr. Amin, would you please stand? This lecture is for my husband. Your support gives me strength and your presence emboldens me. I am standing here because of you. I was happy to just share our lives together. You wanted so much more for me because you knew what I wanted. And so today I have exceeded my destiny because you made it happen. This is a small token of my gratitude and appreciation. I owe you so much more. I hope I don't regret saying all of this. I'd also like a shout out to my daughter, Vidya, whose name means wisdom derived from authentic knowledge. Son-in-law, Dimitri, and the children, Milan and Leah. Together, they are ensuring that we are connected to the 21st century. I cannot tell you how much they have supported to make sure our home is compliant with electricity, load sheddings, with internet and everything. To the audience present, online and in person, I feel the love. Thank you. It is the source of much comfort. My talk is made up today of a series of subsections, which I will point out as I go along. I'll begin with a few comments about my work and its relation to my biography. My work has often been described as anarchistic, dangerous, overly theoretical, anti-tradition, too diverse, and lacking focus. This is true to a large extent. For many years, I wrote what I liked, dabbling in fields like teacher education, gender, palliative care, mathematics education, and higher education. I even co-wrote articles about Hindu marriages and FIFA and the World Cup. Even as a school teacher, I taught history, geography, languages, science, art, needlework, can you believe it? Physical education, and all subjects of interest to gifted children, including astronomy, pinhole photography, archaeology, creative thinking, and calligraphy. I think I got that tree from my mother. My father always said she was a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, a vet, and a policeman rolled into one. My mother was an unschooled intellectual with clarity of purpose and dedication to her family. My dad was an orphan and grew up in the streets of Pretoria. Their learning came from life itself, how to survive and thrive against the odds. We feasted on tales of deprivation, suffering, poverty, as well as resilience, determination, and drive. That was a very strong curriculum for children, and it has had a lasting positive effect on my siblings and myself. Disadvantage is, in our case, an advantage. Resilience is our middle name. Multidisciplinarity is lauded, but throws up so many complications when you are pursuing a professorship. I needed a disciplined home. It took the astute insight of Professor Thabo Masibi, who looked at my work and thought that it belonged to curriculum. And he led me into that field. And that's how I found my home. Thank you, Professor Masibi. I've made it despite the complicated route I followed and the worldview I chose to make sense of curriculum matters. So how could I not achieve? It did not matter that culture and tradition expected me to be a proper daughter, wife, daughter-in-law, and member of the community. It mattered not that education was seen as damaging and a danger to cultural traditions. My mother was certainly correct about that. An educated and free female is dangerous, too independent, too opinionated, and too agentic. It mattered not that my parents were old, staid, and conservative. Their priority was to bring up daughters within the constraints and unwritten rules of culture, caste, and society. I ask again, how could I not succeed? I am the youngest in the family and was born in the year we entered the space age. I am a Sputnik child. It heralded a new beginning, a promising future, a different life. Also, because my parents were really grandparents when I was born, I had the same life opportunities as their grandchildren. So here I am. I think my parents would have been proud of their dangerous, opinionated, independent daughter. I do miss them. To honor my mother and my mother-in-law, I wear a sari, which they both wore with pride every day of their lives. I now want to talk about an event that in a way captures the principal idea of my talk, the notion of uncertainty. It is a quick overview, not so quick, I think, of my thinking about curriculum without referring to curriculum theories, as that might take all day. I must say I battled to craft a narrative that my 8 and 10-year-old grandchildren could understand and that the academics would feel was not too simplistic. I think I didn't achieve either of those. So let's see what happens. In November 2019, the matric class of 1974 gathered to celebrate the 45th anniversary of best and most beloved teacher to deliver the keynote. He asked us 3 questions regarding the content he taught us. As it turned out, none of us could answer any of them. A solid 3-0 win for the teacher. But that's not because we were clueless. Our teacher asked questions that made sense in the 1970s. General knowledge was important then, even though paradoxically, general knowledge requires specific answers, yet we call it general. Consequently, we can deduce that if institutions of learning focus on knowledge transfer, especially of so-called facts, then it subverts the goal of successful living outside of schools and universities. Imagine for a moment if I had to depend on facts that I learned in school and was asked to answer the question, what is the capital of Kosovo? Kosovo did not exist in 1974. Do you remember Pluto, the planet? When we were at school, it was a planet. Fast forward to 2006, and suddenly it's no longer one. It's a dwarf hanging around in the Kuiper belt. So now we have to say Pluto used to be a planet. Science was wrong. Clearly a case of uncertainty, or maybe temporary knowing, if not wrong. Remember when butter was good, then it was bad, then it's good again. Sugar has been linked to increased risk for strokes and heart attacks, but sugar gives energy, or so the adverts tell us. Clearly, facts can change, be refuted, disputed, or even cancelled. Not only people get cancelled. Names can change, new countries can appear, and maps can be redrawn. Change happens, curriculum gets destabilized, and the content becomes uncertain. What seems certain today may be uncertain tomorrow. Think of it like this. What you learn in school is not certain. In line with the thinking of the French historian and philosopher Foucault, these strategic designs contain a complicated power design or dynamic that is characterized by the dominant ideas and knowledge of that particular period. That was a time when Earth was regarded as, So all our knowledge is linked to a particular moment in time. I think that's the point I want to make. There was a time when Earth was regarded as a center of the universe. We know for centuries now that Earth revolves around the sun, or at least until new tools are designed and new observation made to displace that truth. That's what we should be learning, that everything we know is tentative, temporary, and changeable. Foucault makes us aware that what on the surface may appear neutral and inherently valuable is in fact closely intertwined with broader social cultural forces at play. What kind of citizens should we produce? How do we discipline the individual? And who are the forces that subject us to rules and regulations? Curriculum, we can conclude, is not neutral. It is an intervention. It is the product of power that is invisible to most. The way people understand what they learn can change completely depending on the situation. That is what Derrida said about language never being completely clear or stable, even if we pretend that the definitions in the dictionary gives everyone the same understanding of a word. Elon Musk's tweet that he discovered water on Mars shows the instability of language. There it is, a glass of water on a bar of chocolate called Mars. Right? Comedians play with words. We are entertained by their cleverness. There always is a kernel of truth in what they say. So it's amusing because when humans are said to have 2 feet, we really mean they are incapable of smooth rhythmic movements in which both feet are synchronized. But for dogs, we know they do have 2 left feet. However, we are not amused when students make sense in the way they understand. Look at this. When a child says that the synonym for cool is awesome, the teacher marks it wrong, right? So you can imagine that the child is already understanding the word in context, but the teacher is seeking a dictionary-based response. Let's look at the next one. This student has responded exactly as the teacher said, to rewrite each word in alphabetical order. But can you imagine a teacher accepting these answers? So is it not surprising then that our kids are not creative? Because in the early years, they respond creatively, intuitively. Through the structure of education, we discipline the mind according to predetermined rules and functions, and we wonder why we lack the creative drive. Throughout history, people have been hooked on big ideas and stories that grab our attention, like the idea that the world keeps getting better with technology and knowledge, and eventually we'll conquer all diseases through science and live happily ever after. I think that's a joke, but it's a big story. Another big tale is that societies naturally move from being basic to super advanced, like going from hunter-gathering to advanced modern civilized lives. But the French philosopher Lyotard questioned the idea that everyone agrees on one big story about what we learn. This image conveys the idea that we are learning to become sheep, losing our individualism, ability to think, mere followers of fads and trends. Fortunately, decolonization, critical race theory, and social justice theories are ways of challenging these big stories that shape how we think and act. I'm not so sure if we're very successful in applying these in schools. But the idea is that we've got to say, hold on. Maybe there's more to what is being fed to us by what is being pushed into our heads. The big stories, for example, cannot explain war in a modern civilized world. War is becoming more and more uncivilized. Nor can it rationalize poverty, disadvantage, and corruption in the 21st century. We rely on big stories for explanation. This is God's will, or the law of karma. You reap what you sow. It is what it is. Without big stories to hold on to, our sense of certainty is eroded, and that's why we hold on to the big stories. But erosion is necessary to become independent, self-directed learners and thinkers. We have already established that reliance on uncertain curricula is like constructing a building on quicksand. To complicate matters, consider the impact of social media technology and artificial intelligence. There are far more interesting unofficial curricula outside learning institutions, competing with the work that we are doing. Their content is entertaining and holds interest. Learning is so easy. Let's look at this short clip. I'll just stop it there. The point is that here we have augmented reality with artificial intelligence teaching you to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata without any idea of playing the piano. It's so easy, isn't it? So I might yet realize my dream of always, I've always wanted to play the piano. But with this available, I think I'll be able to do that far sooner than I ever thought. I won't wait for my full retirement to engage in that. The AI modes of learning are appealing because multiple senses are targeted. At the flick of a button, if you don't know the English language, text can be translated. And AI can explain concepts and ideas with speed, but not accurately. It has to swim the tide against stronger, more interesting and entertaining content. I do not think that in the short term, we are at risk of being replaced by AI. With prepackaged recipes, templates, and programs, reproduction will increase. Innovation requires much more than copying performances, ideas, and crafts. Moreover, if you question students about deep understanding and what they've learned from entertainment teachers like social media, movies, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook, their responses are often superficial. Teachers are necessary interventionists for acquiring critical skills, so our jobs are still safe. Reading and writing, handwriting, that is, are vital components for learning. We should never forget that. The new developments emphasize the tenuous, temporary, and arbitrary character of curriculum. Curriculum is an abstract idea. Policy makers, people, instructional designers make the choices and teachers implement it. Curriculum is therefore not neutral. It is the means of intervention by those who wield power. In well-resourced, wealthy institutions, AI will supplement and enrich learning. In poorer settings, learning will be uninspiring to a generation that seeks the 3 E's: enjoyment, excitement, entertainment. The trend is towards education as entertainment. I am not suggesting that all content is unnecessary and everything learned is irrelevant. The point is that the content we think is worth teaching may not be as valuable as it is perceived by us. Knowledge, it seems, is dynamic, sometimes contradictory, ambiguous, and volatile, but we hold on to a fixed and packaged curriculum. So let's quickly recall the points that I am trying to push through today. Curriculum is not neutral, language is unstable, what is certain today is uncertain tomorrow, opposing values coexist, facts can be refuted, disputed, or cancelled. The official curriculum is in competition with non-official curricula, and education as entertainment is an emerging trend. So together, these are the ingredients of uncertainty. I will now discuss some of my research, 3 papers that are illustrative of challenging big stories, not quite as big as saving the world, nevertheless, but important in education from my perspective. And I hope you'll allow me to indulge therein. The first one is entitled Critique and Care in Higher Education Assessment. Now, we all know assessment is very important to students. That's all that drives them. How many marks am I getting? Is it 95%? Is it 100%? Or is it that big zero that I'm trying to avoid? And when students don't get what they think they are worth, it creates a lot of dissatisfaction. And don't think I'm talking about school kids. I'm talking about master students. I was teaching a group of master students. And generally, this is the first module they do. It's a very tough module. It's the discourses in educational research and research methodologies. It's things they've probably never heard about. And they have to get used to a whole new language. You know, lots of swear words like ontology, epistemology, and paradigm, and all of those. And they have to grapple with this. So we know from experience that the first assignment, they generally do quite badly. And they get lots of comments, which is critique. The critique is not just random comments, poor and bad and incorrect. It's always with some comments about what are the weaknesses and limitations and how it can be fixed. And they get an opportunity to redo that and submit. And sometimes for some students, they have to do that 2 or 3 times. But the module is designed in such a way that they will pass. In all the years that I taught discourses, I think about 13 years, only 2 students failed the module, which had a very high failure rate before I took over. And those 2 failed because they did not submit anything. Because you even get rewarded for, but be that as it may, 5 students were very upset with the first task when they got, I think at that time I was still giving marks for drafts, very low marks. One even came to my office and said, "Do you know who I am?" You know, so I thought she lost her identity, but yes, so there was a sense that I was cold and unfeeling. And so that was what emerged, this very uncaring lecturer. And so students, these 5, were telling me that I lack care. I'm not showing any kind of caring. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm caring for your mind, not your emotions. So you can already see how language is complicated. I'm talking about critique as a necessary criterion for and skill that you require as a master's student, that you have to acquire that skill. And they saw it as criticism, finding something wrong with me, did not see its developmental value. So they were responding with the heart, and I was responding with the head. And of course, we were passing each other. Be that as it may, and I'm not going into the full story, but what came out of that research paper that I wrote and was published, I think around 2011, is that critique is actually a form of caring, but it's caring for things that you might not recognize. But when the students were asking me to care, they were lodging a critique of my way of teaching. And I wasn't seeming to listen to them. But looking at it from a reflective perspective, when I wrote the paper, I could see where I had gone off. They were critiquing me and I wasn't accepting it. So how could I expect them to accept my critique? So critique is caring. They also were caring for me in some way or the other. It is uncaring to demand caring. For me to demand that they must accept critique, for them to demand caring from me. Both sides were sort of uncaring. And it is uncaring to ignore critique as well. So thus, both care and critique, I came to understand, are tyrannical in nature when demanded. Both are necessary for intellectual and emotional well-being. You cannot teach if students do not have emotional security. That's where I came to understand it. So why is it that I was not able to? And how is it that I'm coming to the conclusion that caring and not caring are one and the same thing? That critique and caring are one and the same thing? I will show the explanatory tool I use for that purpose. Because at the moment, the way we understand care and critique, if we put it on a Cartesian plane, this is a Cartesian plane, you know, where you have north and west and east and south, or here X and Y. If you place them, they seem like they're opposites. East is not west, south is not north. So if we go with this idea of reality, then critique and care cannot be the same. I need another reality which brings these two together, which I will share with you when I go into the next one. So here, let me tell you the story of Leela, who was a student in the study I did for my doctoral work. It's a story of a young girl who faces severe hardships. These are her own words. We are 4 children and I am the oldest. I am 13 years old. My mother was 12 when I was born. My father 15. They don't look like mothers and fathers. They look like friends and brothers and sisters. We are very poor. My father is always shouting, and now they are fighting every day because my mother is having another baby. My grandmother says she's good for making babies. My father doesn't go to work. He sleeps most of the time. Most of the time he is drunk. When he gets some work, he does it. When he doesn't get work, he hits us and swears us the entire day. My mother is always sick. I do things like cleaning the house, washing the clothes, washing the dishes, and cooking the food, feeding the children. At night, I wash the smallest baby. He is 3 years old. He does not like my mother to bath him. Sometimes we don't have lunch. I give my food to him. I get tired and sick, but I don't go to the doctor. It's too expensive. I am not happy at school. The teachers shout me when my work is not done. I stay away a lot to help my mother. The teachers always ask me for a letter, but my mother does not know how to write a letter. She cannot read. I am not happy that my mother is having another baby. So these are the living circumstances that some children endure. The curriculum does not factor in such cases. Irrespective of the circumstances, homework is expected, proper clothing like uniforms have to be worn, and attention paid during teaching. Due to these demands, a tired and hungry Leela is absent most days. What the study uncovered is the uselessness of language concepts to convey reality. When we think of parents, we imagine responsible adults, caregivers, and providers. When we describe someone as a child, we imagine being carefree, having fun, and playing with friends. In this case, it is the opposite. The parents are the children, and Leela is the only adult in the family. Leela's story is not an isolated case. When we look through Stats South Africa reports, the numbers of children living in unhealthy circumstances is worrying. These are 2017 figures. The situation is probably worse now. Can you imagine that 61% of poor families only survive because 12 million children get child support grants? And all the time around us, we hear about how these grants are being abused. The research shows it's being used for survival. And just look at the last point. The poor spend close to 30% of their income on food, while the middle class spends just 13% because they earn so much more. Does our curriculum in the higher and basic sectors factor this in. I think we do try, but financial resources are constrained. The fiscal position of the country is tenuous. I'll not say anything more about that. The third paper, which I use the same tool to explain the problems with language, was a paper that I wrote with my doctoral supervisor, Renuka Vita. We write about two teachers from the study, one who chose to know her students and one who refused to know. You see, there's this big idea that's peddled all the time. Read any book on what makes a good teacher. It will tell you that a good teacher knows her students. They never expect it of men, I think. So Bernice, the teacher, so the two stories is about a teacher, Bernice, who chose not to know. She refused to know. And Naveen, who invested time and energy, stealing teaching time to counsel all of these students with major problems. This was a school in which I would say 90% of the students come from very poor backgrounds. So Bernice, who refused to know the students, was very successful. She was the only teacher in the school who produced A's in matric. None of the other teachers could achieve it. Bernice had a philosophy. No excuses. I don't want to know you. I don't want any stories. You do my homework and you come to class. And that's what the students did. They never bunked her class. They did everything. For the other teachers who were very sympathetic, students just bunked. They used up time for counseling. They needed it. They needed it. And Naveen provided, he represents the teachers that did this. So he left teaching. He would just quickly explain something, leave it on the board, and work with 3 or 4 children and try to help them solve their problems, perhaps take them to the clinic and so on. So Bernice, who refused to know, was successful. And Naveen, who knew, could not, because he was so traumatized by the trauma of the students. It interfered with his ability to teach. So one of the things that comes out is that if you want to teach well, refuse to know your students. Concentrate on your content, your pedagogy, and you're a winner. But if we look deeper, what explains Bernice's success? She knows what she doesn't want to know. It's impossible to be in a school where 90% are suffering and you say you don't know. She didn't know who was having what problem, but she just closed her mind to it. And the other teachers allowed the pressure to escape. So her success depended on her colleagues' failures. So you can see now we don't have the language to kind of express that kind of knowing and not knowing. And in fact, what my study concludes at the end is knowing and not knowing is a paradox because they're one and the same thing. I'm not going to discuss the other 2 findings in which we write about how knowing is dangerous and how not knowing is useful. Because it was useful for Bernice, it was dangerous for Naveen because it comes at a greater expense. In a paper that I wrote with Melanie Martin, we wrote about how teachers, because people often see African teachers in poor schools as being unfeeling and uncaring. But these teachers were digging deep into their pockets to provide for the children. In fact, some of them could not meet their rental for the month because they were helping so many children with basic needs, with food, water, and so on. So knowing comes at a great expense and is dangerous for the well-being of the teacher. So how can we explain this contradiction, these kinds of paradoxes, this kind of language issues? So I turn to another surface, the Mobius strip. So the Mobius strip is a different kind of surface At first glance, it appears to be a two-sided, how could I say, a two-sided strip with two sides, an inside and an outside, and two edges. But when you look at it and when you construct a Mobius strip, I do not have the time to do that now, you'll find that it is one side and one edge. So when you think you're inside and you travel far enough, suddenly you're on the outside. So if you look over here, you can see how the outside folds into the inside. So you might think, well, I'm a knower, and that's a not knower. But as you move along your route, actually you become the not knower, and the other one is the knower. So this, in a way, brings out reality for you to see how two incompatibles exist in the same plane simultaneously. And it might befuddle you. You might think, I know, when you don't know. Because what I didn't tell you is how the teachers came to know. They asked the students who lied about their backgrounds. Who wants a teacher to know that they're living under such poor circumstances? Who wants a teacher to know that the father beats the mother every day? There are some things we are not entitled to know. We should not be digging into those backgrounds unless they want to tell us. So children lie. There was one kid who told whose mother told him, don't tell the school that you don't have a father. He told everyone in the school, my father is a taxi owner. We live in a huge mansion and we own 10 vehicles. They did not even have enough food to eat on a daily basis. So kids lie. That's how teachers know. They really don't know. Then some kids volunteer information about other kids. Also lies. They have a problem with that kid. There's probably some fighting over some boyfriend or girlfriend. And then the teacher phones the parent and tells them, your daughter's seeing a boy. Because interestingly, in this school, the Indian teachers always reported the Indian girls to their parents, looking after their culture, you know, making sure that the girls are disciplined and kept pure and so on. And then the parents would come to school and beat the hell out of the girl, which was a lie. You know, so things like that. So teachers have all this misinformation and they think that that is what they know. But what also comes out is how little we know about those we teach. So I think at this point, in the interest of saving time, I'm just going to go through some of the explanatory tools I have used over the time to explain what is happening. And I think part of my contribution to scholarship is that I have steered quite far from educational theorists and so on. In fact, in my PhD, I did not even have a literature review on the field of education because I worked quite a bit on political theory. I feel it offers better tools and concepts to understand what is happening in education. That's not to say that educational theories do not have use. But for me, it did not make sense with the kind of work that I was engaged in. So let's look at the image here. It's one of Escher's tiles. And if we look at this, it captures curriculum in its complexity. So we all know that curriculum occupies a certain space and time. You cannot think about a week with 9 periods a day. You cannot go and add more content because you can't extend the day to 15 periods. So this tile captures the frame within which it is done. And often what we see is the official curriculum, which in this instance are the white figures, the elephant, the fish, the guitar. Those represent sort of the curriculum. But if you look at the background, those dark images, you'll see that there's a fish and a kangaroo and so on. That is what we call the hidden curriculum. It captures the idea of the hidden curriculum. That which we don't know the students are learning in our classrooms. And that's the hidden curriculum. And then if you look at the white spaces outside the blue block, that represents the null curriculum, that which should be taught, but is not in the curriculum. And there's so much. Everyone has a perspective on what should be taught. I've been told in 10 minutes, load shedding stops, so everything will shut down. If that happens, please hold on, we will be back. But I'll try to finish in 10 minutes. In this sketch by Escher, A Tessellation of Fish and Bird, I use it to explain the notion of curriculum without borders. That is another contribution of mine to the paradox of knowing. Curriculum without borders is my contribution to the debates on decolonization. Because decolonization, sometimes, depending on who you read, sort of divides the North and South, the East and West, in terms of what we should learn and think. But this captures what I would say, if we think about curriculum as not having a border, that it's porous, that we can add and pull out things as is required by the context, it makes it much more flexible. So I am suggesting that we work in the equatorial zone, where it's not so easy to distinguish between bird and fish, between sky and sea. But often the way language operates, it wants us to operate at the polar ends. Clearly, this is a fish, and that is a bird. So for me, this is another explanatory tool that I use to kind of push the idea of curriculum without borders. I cannot go into much more detail. In this instance, please do not understand what this image represents. It is a hydra, a microorganism that lives in the ocean. Now, the hydra is a particular organism that is only made up of 3 parts. It has a head, as you can see, with the body and a foot. What is amazing about the hydra is its ability to regenerate for centuries. It can live for hundreds of years. You can chop off the head, you can chop off the foot, it will regenerate, it will regrow a head, it will regrow a foot. And I used this in a paper that I wrote on chronic disaster. I was invited to write on chronic disaster on a book which was looking at disaster. And I kept challenging the team that in because they were talking really about natural disasters, war, and so on. And I said in South Africa, disaster is not an event. For some people, it's a lifelong thing. There are many families, their entire life is a disaster. And this organism captures that idea that when you have poverty-stricken families, okay, so you chop off the head of poverty. For how long? For a short while, and then the head regrows. You can add some more supports and resources and get rid of the foot. It will regrow as soon as support and so is withdrawn. So chronic disaster is a feature of many lives for many years. And I think it captures that. So this one is that whole thing around what is missing in the curriculum, the null curriculum. Many people are talking about subjects that should be in schools. So we know some of them are already there. Coding, taxes, taxation, and so on. But let's look at something like basic home repairs or cooking. We know about the rise of obesity and malnutrition and malnourished amongst the rich, the middle classes, and so on. Because food is bought on a daily basis, irrespective of how it is prepared or how unhealthy it is. So these are some things that we may consider in the future, even at university level. Maybe we should offer modules of cooking and do the science of cooking. And then I just found this and I felt I just had to put in to show you how your education can damage you. So this was a cartoon developed by two Indians in India, appears in a newspaper in India. And I wondered, why were the images so Western-like? Did not represent the community to which it speaks to. Or is that my own problem? I'm not sure. But it made me think that is decolonization a problem that we are obsessed with? And maybe everyone does not think. And I think this is my last slide, because I told you I went from knowing to not knowing. And you can see, I knew everything when I started with almost no qualifications. And as I increased from undergrad to master's to PhD, and then of course, when I became full professor, now I overshot it and I know a lot about nothing. So I think that captures it. So before I end, I want to give a shout out to the three principal people who have shaped my life and my thinking, my academic life. Professor Renuka Vital, who was my supervisor for the master's and the doctoral education. Her way of thinking really spun my brain around. You all know Professor Michael Samuel, who was my co-supervisor for the doctoral study. He challenges me all the time and pushes my thinking. And we always are having these deep debates and working together. And Michael, it has been such a pleasure to be one of yours. And in 2011, I met Professor Bert Olivier at a conference, and he's become my mentor ever since. And when I delve into new fields like post-humanism, and especially when I was dabbling with post-structuralism, I always spoke to him to make sure that I interpret things the way they should be. Not that there should be a rule, but at least that I wasn't making a fool of myself. So a big shout out to these three, as well as to Professor Brian Gerard. I know he's online. He's the one who challenged me to write on chronic disaster. And over the years, he has gently pushed and prodded me to take my work into a more application mode rather than theory. Thank you, Brian, for your guidance. And I just wanted to end with these theorists who have influenced my thinking. Finally, I want to say thank you to those who have traveled very far. I mean, all of you are special, but some of you are a little bit more. Professor Leslie Lagrange and Professor Petro Duprier from the University of Stellenbosch, Professor Newman Wadisango, supposed to be here, I'm not sure if he's around, from Limpopo, Professor Lamole Schlatzwayo from UJ, there's he sitting. He's the person I most admire in the younger group. Dr. Safura Miran, is she around? She came from UNISA, maybe got stuck somewhere, doesn't matter. But even if they're not in the room, they are online, and there are people from all parts of the world. I thank you all for being present today. And I think I will end there.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome me back to the podium to deliver the vote of thanks. Let me thank Professor Nyna Amin for an inspiring, thought-provoking inaugural lecture highlighting the uncertain, fluid, contextual, time-bound, and incomplete nature of knowledge. UKZN is proud to have you as a distinguished member of our community. That you continue to support the university's various endeavors is a testimony to your commitment to the institution which you have served with excellence for many years. Thank you very much. We are truly grateful to your family, Mr. Amin, and your daughter, son-in-law, as you have indicated during your inaugural, as well as several mentors that you have mentioned who have played a major role in nurturing your academic career. To us, as members of the academic community, your leadership skills have not gone unnoticed. We hereby express our appreciation for the role that you played, leading postgraduate studies in the School of Education for many years. And during your leadership, I do not recall a single incident that we had to worry about in your portfolio. I can also say, without a fear of contradiction, that the doctoral throughput in education grew significantly during your tenure, something that made me and Professor Msibi and the university very happy and proud. We appreciate your commitment to your portfolio and your overall support to the students, the early career scholars, and the doctoral cohorts. Turning now to the several delegates who have attended today's lecture within the UKZN, the province, the country, and internationally, thank you very much for making this an important event, because without your participation, it would not have the meaning that it ought to have. We thank you for co-celebrating Prof. Amin's successes with us. Finally, I would like to thank the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Teaching and Learning, Professor Msibi, under whom Prof. Amin served for several years when he was still the Dean of the school. We thank colleagues in the School of Education, especially their sense of family and support to each other, thus ensuring a robust intellectual climate for the inaugurant. To the corporate relations team, led by Ms. Norma Zondo, Ms. Pamela Adams, and Ms. Sandra Ramsurut, and the registrar's team, led by Dr. Cleland, thank you very much for organizing a very successful inaugural lecture. Again, we always truly appreciate the support that you give to the college and the university. With those words, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you all today, and may you go in peace. I thank you.